let's talk about the current state of the jungle in Deadlock. So recently with the 3-lane update, we've had a lot more jungle that's been added to the game. Right now, I'm just spectating a in-game so that you can have something to look at while I'm talking. But this video is mostly going to be talking about a couple points relating to the jungle and what the current issues with the jungle are. So the first point is, of course, there are a lot more camps today. And is that an issue? So I've heard a lot of complaints and, I've read a lot of comments, whether that be in my chat or on Reddit or on forums, etc., where people are like, there's too much jungle in Deadlock now. Every game is just like a farm fest, blah, blah, blah. And people are not really happy with the current state of it. So I have 5 points I'd like to go over. The first point is that I think this is mostly a skill issue. So I'm not saying that there are no issues with the jungle, and my other points address issues with the jungle, but I do believe that the jungle being as much of an issue as it is at least in part due to the average skill level of the players. So I think if we fast forwarded 2 years in time and everybody had 1,000 extra hours in the game on average, I think the jungle being the way it is right now would be much less problematic. My reasoning for this is that every time that you jungle, you give up on something, right? You give up on space, you give up on being able to fight for the lanes, you give up on being able to pressure objectives. Jungle in itself does not win you games, right? For example, a game like Dota has a lot more jungle, but it's not necessarily an issue because strictly jungling is not going to win you the game because everybody knows how to jungle, right? And if both teams just jungle, well, neither team gains an advantage over the other, which is why, people don't jungle as much necessarily. Now, of course, there are some flaws to that argument, and I don't want to dwell on it too much. But my final thoughts on this are, when you're playing in competitive play at a very high level, like I do with my team fairly often, the jungle takes a whole different meaning, and I think eventually everybody could get to that level. But the problem is that in your regular matchmaking, first of all, people aren't coordinated, so invading the jungle is not as viable, and also everybody just kind of wants to farm, right? Like everybody understands that farming is good because farming gives you money, and therefore like everybody farms, and there's this kind of like constant feedback cycle of just like, oh, I'm farming, I'm getting money, etc., etc., and people just kind of keep doing it, and then everybody's like, oh, the game's a farm fest, right? So I think part of it is a skill issue and a perception issue in the sense that maybe the jungle right now is not so problematic, but what is more problematic is the fact that people don't know how to deal with people jungling too much, which is, well, you're going to put pressure on objectives, you're going to put pressures on the lanes, and you're going to invade their jungle. If they're just jungling, you're going to catch people, you're going to kill them, and you're going to secure a lead that way, right? Because jungling on your own side of the map really doesn't give you a lead unless you're able to jungle much faster than they are. Like, for example, if you have a 7, right, that's kind of why 7 has such a high win rate, because 7 jungles so fast, so he has like an inherent advantage compared to most of the cast. And the other thing is like, people don't really know how to counter it. I made a video on how to counter 7 way back in the day, like back in September, when he was a huge issue to most of the player base, and it was kind of the same thing, just like invade his jungle, put pressure on him, he's not that strong early, etc., etc. Some of these things are still true, others are not as much. The second issue with the jungle, this one is a little bit more of a game design. It's the itemization, right? So right now, there's a few items in the game that kind of break the whole principle of like jungling. So for example, once again, to make a comparison to Dota, and Dota is a ton of jungle, but you can't just like do the jungle right away, right? Not everybody can clear the jungle. Like your support heroes, they can't really jungle effectively, or they can jungle somewhat, but it's not going to be very effective a lot of the time, right? It's going to be very, very slow, and there's things that they could be doing on the map that are going to be more worth a while. The problem in Deadlock is that you have items like Monster Rounds, you have items like Cold Front, you have items like Torment Pulse, or all these other items that just make it so that farming is like extremely easy. And these items are, you've got 12 slots in Deadlock without any flex slots, and so it's very easy to just slot these items in. And a lot of the time, they're just incredibly like cost effective and just extremely strong to buy. For example, like Cold Front costs 1250, gives you 10% spirit resist, which is extremely valuable. And on top of that, it deals a base damage of 75, and it does 2x damage to non-heroes, meaning that at base, if you have 0 spirit, it will do a base damage of 150 to neutral creeps and troopers, etc. And it also has like a spirit scaling of something like 1.5. I'm not actually entirely sure on the scaling itself, but it's like an insane amount of scaling, really. And so with items like this, anyone can one-shot camps, right? Anyone with Cold Front Like if I look in this game, like for example here, you know, you've got this Viscous has Cold Front, he's gonna one-shot most camps, right? This Abrams doesn't have it, but if you look at a bunch of other people, this Pocket's got Cold Front, he's just gonna one-shot camps. He obviously can't one-shot these tier 3 camps here, right? But he can one-shot a lot of camps, and that makes it so the farming speed, I mean, look, he just walked to the small camp, just instantly cleared it, right? And that's not because his hero is inherently good at it, although it, you know, Pocket is inherently good at clearing camps with both of his abilities, actually all of his abilities. But it's just because he bought an item, and it's Cold Front, and it's 1250, and it's just way too affordable, and it's way too strong. Same thing with monster rounds. I think that these are the biggest culprits, but, you know, items like Tesla bullets also contribute. The third point I have about the jungle is the lack of another objective. So right now, there's essentially the standard objectives, which are the walkers and mid-boss, right? And then there's the urn. Those are pretty much the only objectives in Deadlock. Like, there is nothing else, nothing extra to do. And so what happens is, let's say that the game right now is 18 minutes in, right? The game that I'm spectating right now, it's 18 minutes. It's even for both teams. Mid-boss has been done, right? So the right team did mid-boss. And now there's really nothing to do on the map other than the walkers, right? So all the plays are going to happen. They're going to try to maybe get some sort of advantage and try to force a walker, but they're only up 5k souls. And so really they can't force a walker because walkers, PSA to everyone out there, if you didn't know, walkers give you resistances if you're nearby them. If it's an allied walker, it gives you 25% bullet resist and 25% spirit resist. Now, if that doesn't mean anything to you, think about it this way. It's like everyone you're fighting, if you're fighting people under their own walker, they have bullet armor and spirit armor for free. So they just have 2,500 more net worth than you, and it's even better than that, right? Because usually that would take 2 slots, but they don't even need any slots and things like that, right? There is also the buffs, which spawn every 5 minutes, but it's not very frequent, so I don't count it as like a regular objective, and usually it spawns at the same time as the urn, so it's like kind of buffs and urn. And so there's these large windows of time where the urn is done and all the other objectives are done, and then what happens is that we've got a 6v6 fight here happening at the walker because it's the only thing to do. But this fight only happened after the entire jungle was cleared, right? As you can see, there's not a lot of jungle left on the map, and you need to understand that obviously it's a little bit late night, but this is like one of the, you know, higher ranked games happening in NA right now. Like, these are not new players generally, right? So if you go to like lower ranks, if I spectated lower ranks, I'm sure that it would look even slower and even more of a farm fest. And I think that adding another objective could help with that, because you would give another reason for people to be active, and you would punish people that are jungling too much as well. Because if they jungled too much, well, they wouldn't be able to contest that objective, and then they would lose out on tempo, whatever that objective gave you, right? Whether that objective gave you, you know, super troopers in one lane, or that objective just gave you some AP or some souls or whatever it may be, right? Like, there's a bunch of things that it could possibly give you. But regardless of what it gave you, I think that it would just incentivize people to be active in jungle a little bit less. Another small point I wanted to touch on, which I did touch on earlier, is that there are a few heroes that are just much better at clearing the jungle than other heroes right now, and it gives unfair advantage to teams without there being a draft present in the game. So right now there's no drafting phase, right? And so you might just get lucky and get all the heroes that are good at clearing the jungle on your team. Or actually, that's kind of unlucky because you don't want too many of them, right? But you might just get unlucky and get no heroes that are good at clearing the jungle on your team, or very few, and then all of a sudden, if you guys just play the way that a regular like game would go, where both teams jungle, etc., well, you're disadvantaged because you're playing into Wraith 7 and they're going to clear the jungle instantly. Whereas on your team, you've got a bunch of heroes like Kelvin, you've got Mirage, you have like Abrams, you have, you know, all these heroes that are not so good, like Vindicta, all these heroes that can clear the jungle but are not, like, they definitely don't excel at it. Now, my last point is that the Sinner Sacrifice giving 3 golden statue buffs is just way too good. The reality is 3 golden statue buffs is insane value, and when you stack that over the course of a game, it just very, very highly incentivizes people to, you know, clear the Sinner Sacrifices rather than do anything else, right? The Sinner Sacrifices are extremely high priority, and like the reason for that, it's quite simple, is that if you clear enough of them, I mean, you'll just get a ton of health or a ton of ammo or a ton of spirit power, and those stats are permanent and they stack, right? So the more you clear during a game, technically the stronger you'll be, and it's essentially like buying items, right? Let's say you get lucky and you get triple health from a from a Sinner Sacrifice, that's a total of 60 health. If you look at some tier 1 health items, right, Enduring Spirit only gives you 75 bonus health, so you're almost getting like a tier 1 item worth of health. Same thing for Spirit, right? Every time you get 2 Spirit, well, think about it, extra Spirit gives you 14, so all you need is 7 of those, and then all of a sudden you have extra Spirit. And there are golden urns that are scattered across the map, right? It's not just sorry, they're not urns, like the golden little vases or whatever. And you know, it's way too strong in my opinion. It should be 2. I don't even know if it should be 2. I think maybe it should just be 1, and then you have to hit the timing to get the 1, and if you don't hit the timing with the heavy melee, you just get 0. Of course, that opinion may sound a bit drastic, and I know people like the dopamine hit of getting all these things, but the reality is I just don't think it's healthy for the game, in my opinion. And as always, when I make these videos, I've communicated my thoughts on this, you know, directly either on the forums or to the developers. So I'm not making this video just to complain. I'm just making it to kind of like share my point of view on this thing and kind of be curious what you guys think in the comments. So essentially the TLDR is, I don't think that the current state of jungle is a huge issue, but I think if you combine the fact that people are not very good at the game yet, right, so they don't know how to punish jungling. There are items that make it extremely easy to one-shot camps, such as Cold Front is like definitely the biggest culprit. There's no other objective, so like sometimes there is no better play than jungling, right? On top of that, you combine that with the fact that the Sinner Sacrificers are just give you like a shit ton of stats, and you kind of have the recipe for the game to feel drawn out at a lower level, right? So like for the average player right now, the game probably feels drawn out. It probably feels like you're juggling too much. It probably feels like it's a little bit of a farm fest. And these are things that were all less true on the previous map. And while I do think that this map is definitely a step in the right direction, I think that if some of these issues are addressed, it'll feel much better for the average player. I don't think they necessarily need to like nerf the jungle as a whole. I think just adding a new objective and nerfing the Sinner Sacrifices would be better. And then I think it's also partly on me and other high-level players and content creators to help educate the community on how we should all be playing the game, right? And kind of like have everyone be a little bit more active and be looking for plays and be looking for pressure, so that the people who are constantly jungle get punished instead of getting to have 50,000 net worth as 7. Let me know what you guys think about the current state of jungling in the comments, as always. More than happy to hear your thoughts. And I'm live on Twitch fairly often, so you know, come say hi on the stream. I'm also live on YouTube, right? So just come say hi in the chat. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to help answer. Have a good one.